Right. Hello, everybody, and greetings from sunny Oxford. Well, a little cloudy, but mainly sunny. What's the weather like where you are? Fine, windy, sunny, thank God. Humid, yeah, all right. And rainy, oh dear, Carmen, I'm sorry about that. But oh dear, gloomy, Olina. Anyway, welcome to whatever the weather's like near where you are. My name's Nick Thorner, and I'm a teacher here in Oxford. I teach at a school in the centre and mostly teach Ielts, and I'm also an Ielts examiner. And myself and a guy called Lewis Rogers, we've just written a book as well for Ielts, which will be coming out in the summer. So I just wanted to share with you today some ideas we had for helping students prepare for particularly lower level candidates for the Ielts exam. Now, I guess you're all here because you teach lower level students Ielts, so I hope that's the case. So I'm going to ask you a question to start with. What special problems do lower level candidates have in your experience? Just type into the chat box some ideas. So what particular problems do lower level candidates have in your experience? So 2 comprehensions: vocabulary, mainly writing, speaking skills, topic vocabulary, pronunciation, fluency, reading quickly, yeah, pronunciation again, real pronunciation, writing. Okay, fluency coming up a couple of times as well. Accuracy, that's the first time that's come up there. Confidence, that's a good one, isn't it? Yeah. In fact, Ambar, that's kind of the one I really want to focus on a little bit today, so we'll come back to confidence quite a lot during the webinar. The enemy is reading. Yes, not understated either. I think many would see it that way. Okay, so the title then, Prepare Your Foundation Level Students for Ielts Success. What I thought we could do to begin with is just have a look at a few of the tasks that students might get in the Ielts exam. So here we go. These are real test questions taken from past papers. I'll give you just a second to have a quick look through them. Okay, now, first question there. Which words do you think your students might have difficulty with? Consumption, 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 consumption. Definitely consumption then. Punishment. Factors, yes, of course, yeah. Fuel, yeah, okay. All right, good. Well, let's have a look at some of that vocabulary in a little more detail. If we go on to the next slide, let's just test your voting buttons out, see if we can get those working. So we need to do a 3-option poll. Have you got 3 options? No, wait a minute. Okay, so now you should see 3 options in your poll menu, A, B or C. I'd like you to decide if those words are B1, B2 or C1. It's a close race between A and B at the moment. Use your polling icon, sorry, your polling voting buttons rather than the chat room, and then we can see a sense of what proportion of you are voting for what. Okay, so I've just put the responses there on the whiteboard, and you can see that most of you have actually gone for A. Well, you may be surprised to know they're actually B. Most of these are words which come in at B2, which surprised me as well. I thought I'd share with you a few more words which may surprise you. globalise, migration, and obesity. And these words, well, I won't ask you because I'm sure you can guess, but they do indeed come in at C1 level, which shocked me really when I first found that out. Quick question to you. Can you raise your hand using the button if you would teach these words to your students as part of a vocabulary syllabus? So just click on the hand button. Okay, well, a good proportion of you would teach these words. Okay. And I think that was kind of my point, really, that if you're going to go into the Ielts exam, I think you do need to have awareness and knowledge of quite a bit of vocabulary that's above the kind of level you might come in at. If we look at where our students are, you can see here that they would probably come in around 4.5 to 5, whereas a lot of the words we just looked at are around this level, 6.5 to 7. There you go. That, I think, illustrates perhaps one of the challenges we have. But I'm going to move on and illustrate another one now. What I did was took 4 of those questions and I just tried to write a reply to them in language which I thought would be sort of B1, fairly simple, straightforward language. So here we go. The first one. Some people believe there should be fixed punishments. Do you agree? And a possible response, no. I think it's important to think about why someone does a crime. The second one, what factors contribute to job satisfaction? There are many, but I think respect is very important. So the language there I've illustrated is kind of B1 language. Maybe a bit of collocation there, do a crime, but we would normally say commit a crime, so that really is bringing it down a level. But I wanted to ask you, can you imagine your students coming up with that language? If not, why not? Do you want to just type into the chat box why you think students might not come up with that language? White crime is taboo, yes, okay. Restricted registers, okay. They tend to produce short answers. Sometimes they find thinking of ideas is the problem. It needs a good command of language. They might not formulate in a logical way, so that would be fluency, wouldn't it, if they couldn't formulate language logically. Answers will use simpler language, yeah. Yeah, sentences are short or fragmented, quite complicated for them. They don't think about these matters often. That's an interesting response, Vera. Yeah, okay. I think that's kind of, I think there are 2 things that come out there. First of all, I agree. I don't think they think about these sort of things that much. We give them perhaps practice in the Ielts exam sort of once a week at speaking and producing ideas. But most of the time, students will be probably discussing things at a more sort of personal level. So they may not practice talking about this kind of conversation. And I think we can describe it as sort of evaluative language. It's something that we expect them to do, but which I think many students simply don't get the practice in doing. So what I'd like to suggest is that there are 4 things that well, sorry, before I do that, I did a quick bit of research with my IELTS students, and this kind of confirms what many of you have just said. Obviously, mistakes is a big issue, and things like not having time. But down here at the bottom, I won't have any ideas. And I think that's something which does really concern students. They worry about those killer questions that they cannot answer. The other thing, yeah, they won't sort of understand the questions, particularly in the writing. and they'll write off-topic responses. So the 4 things I think we need to be doing. Because a lot of the language is above B1 level, I think we have to expose students to higher level language. Now by this I don't mean that we have to teach them the grammar or the structures they need to use it, but I think we have to teach them to be able to recognize it and to use the words to express ideas that will come up in the exam. Secondly, I think we have to teach students or expose students to lots of ideas and lots of world knowledge, because I think very often students are preoccupied with their perhaps own lives and don't have the contact with sort of the issues that tend to crop up in the exam. Once we've done that, of course, it's really important that we develop in them a habit of responding critically. And finally, that we provide regular structured practice and evaluative language. So not just once a week, a bit of practice for the speaking exam, but very regular, every lesson, practice at expressing evaluative language such as opinions or comparative structures. How do we do this? It's all very well saying we need to do that, but how are we going to get them to do it? Well, this is where I think world knowledge can come in. What do we mean by world knowledge, first of all? Well, I don't mean the capitals of the world. By world knowledge, I mean ideas about how things in the world happen, cause and effect relationships, the way some things tend to impact on other things. I think if we teach them about things that happen in the news or things that we hear about through the media, we can do a number of things. I think we can give them those ideas they need to contribute in the exam. I think we can also give them a sort of platform to practice expressing all that complicated evaluative language. Of course, because the language we see in the news is very topical, we're exposing them to lots of terms which will crop up in the Ielts exam, things like obesity or migration. And I think most importantly, Ielts lessons can be a little bit arcane. Sometimes we use topics which, for reading text, for example, which are a little bit sort of esoteric. We don't need to, or they don't need to know much about, I don't know, how a lock works, for example, or something like that. But when we teach world knowledge, I think it adds a source of interest because it's their world after all. So a way of engaging them personally. All right, so how do we teach world knowledge in the classroom? Obviously, we can't get them just reading newspapers and playing, BBC World Service to them all day. We've got to find ways that we can do it that they can manage at a low level. And the first thing I want to suggest to you really is that we start to use the infographic. Now, infographics, I imagine you're all familiar with them, but they've started springing up all over the place on the net now. I won't actually take you on a web tour now, but this is just a page from Google. If you click in infographic and pollution, then immediately you'll get reams and reams of these sort of diagrams with hard-hitting data jumping out at you and all sorts of images. I'm going to take one just to illustrate the point, which we've actually included in the book we've done. So this one then is about society. Now what I've done is labelled, I don't know if you can see, A, B, C, D and E. So I've just taken 5 of the infographic sort of pieces of information there. We've got 1 in 5 preschool children in the USA are cared for by fathers. We've got 29% of people in the UK don't know their neighbours' names. Oh, disgraceful. We've got 27% of Italians, sorry, no, that's wrong. 27 is the average age for Italians to leave their home, parental home. We've got 29% of grandmothers say they are raising their own children. And finally, we've got the age of criminal responsibility, so 15 in Denmark and in some parts of Mexico, not all, but in some parts there is a very low age of criminal responsibility. Can I ask you to do some voting again? So, which statistic worries you the most? And this time we need 5. So wait a minute, let's give you 5 options. There we are. So if you can choose A to E, which statistic do you think concerns you the most? Yeah, do use the voting buttons if you can. They are in the bar just above where the names of the people in the chat room are. Okay. All right, so here are your responses. I'll just move that there to the side. So, most of you think B. Yeah, I know. I agree. And the E, the criminal responsibility. Yeah. I feel I should just say something in defence of poor British people. Do you think there's any advantages to not knowing your neighbours' names? Just type in the chat box if you feel there are some advantages. No. Oh dear. Don't have to lend them tea. I like that one. Solitude. Yes. Or maybe we could say privacy. That I think that was the idea. Fewer conflicts, maybe. Privacy. Yeah. All right. So most of you thinking that's a terrible indictment of British people, but maybe a few things we could discuss or debate. Yeah. For emergency purposes, true. It's a good thing, obviously. All right. Now, what we just did is I presented you an infographic there with 6 or 7 different hard-hitting points, and fairly quickly we've got into a sort of conversation, and that's with a load of experts in English. With students, would it be possible? And I think the answer is yes. Have a look at the infographic in front of you. There are 3 things there which I think make these perfect for starting off a quick discussion in a lesson. First of all the information there is presented as numbers. And numbers, of course, are an international language. There are very few issues in the world, I think, that can't really be reduced to a few hard-hitting statistics. So infographics get issues across really quickly. And of course, you also have the language that they have to read as well, but you've got the diagrams, you've got the illustrations to support the meaning. So even if you look at, I don't know, if you don't know the word raising for raising grandchildren, you've got the bottle and the Zimmer frame to help students understand. Or criminal responsibility, you've got the handcuffs. The third reason why I think this gets students, even lower level students, into quick conversations is because there's very little text. Sometimes in class, I think we always do the discussion after we do a great long reading text or a long sort of listening passage. But I think by using things like infographics, we can get these messages across really quickly and get students talking. So, infographics, that's the first point. Lots of websites have them. The daily infographic is another one you could try as well. Let's move on. Here's another infographic then. But what I want to do now is explore a little bit about how you can get language or elicit evaluative language using infographics. So, if you can have a look at the picture here, this is the city Seoul. So, if any of you are from Korea, you may have noticed this or recognized it. Can you type into the chat box what has happened here in these pictures? What has happened in Seoul? Greenery added, gone green. Road replaced with river. Oh, there we go. Fully formed sentence. It has been. Oh, I can't remember what it was now. The chat box has gone up, but some very good sentences there. reduce the traffic. Yeah. Okay, good. Now, you're just using short phrases because you're typing as quick as you can. But interestingly, I think that's what perhaps a lot of students might do as well in spoken English. So they might say, green, more water, or more green. What I think we need to do is try and elicit longer sentences, such as, it has been clearly improved. Thanks, Vera. Or that one from Maria, more importance has been given to the environment. Okay, so doing this, I think, can try and help students to form longer phrases or longer sentences. If I just give you an example then of the kind of thing they might have come up with. Here we go, the first one. So if you just look there. The government has created green spaces. Now, nothing difficult about that, but it's quite interesting that I think many students wouldn't think that the government had created them. They might not think of the natural subject for a sentence like that. And then we didn't discuss the effect much, but if you look below, the temperature has fallen. I think a lot of students possibly wouldn't come up with the present perfect there. I think having these open class discussions where we try and get them to apply language to what is patently obvious visually can really get some fantastic structures from them. Of course, what we need to do then is to practice it in a kind of structured way. And I think what we can do is drill this sort of language by asking different types of questions that essentially elicit the same answers. So let's have a look here. What I want you to do is respond in the chat box to each of the questions I ask, and we'll just see how your language changes according to the structuring of the question. So here we go, the first one. What would happen if the government created green spaces? People would be happier. There would be more space to walk. We would have a better world. Yeah, fantastic. And all the second conditionals flooding through. That's, the air would be cleaner. Yeah. Oh, third conditional would have been cleaner. Let's look at the second one. Why do governments create green spaces? Perhaps type a few answers in for that one. Great. So we've got some becauses and lots of infinitives coming through to gain popularity. Somebody cynical there. To reduce pollution, to give a healthier environment, to improve life quality. Okay, fantastic. Let's do the next one, just to make the point. What happens if you create green spaces? Birds return, yes. People's lives change, fantastic. Great, you have a better environment, yeah, there is less pollution and crowding, fantastic. So, what we can do then is we can take those model sentences and just by rephrasing the questions, we can get a whole range of language from the students, all of which could be useful depending on what the examiner asks them in the exam. What we could also do then is personalize it a little bit. So we could then ask them what's happened in your city. And so instead of having the government has created green spaces, maybe they'll say the government has created cycle lanes, or the government has banned cars. And then you could go through the same drills, the same questions drills in pairs, get students doing similar questioning and answering. So there we go. Let's move on for a moment, and I want to move away from infographics a bit now and look at some other kind of content that I think we could bring in to the classroom quite easily. Here we go. A story, change of luck for homeless man. You probably saw this story, or I think it was about maybe 6 months ago now, last summer perhaps. And it was a guy, I'll tell you in case you didn't see it, it was a guy who was homeless, and a lady came to him with some money, a few coins, and she put her hands sort of in his cup to drop the money into it. And as she did it, the ring on her finger, the diamond wedding ring, which you can see on the screen there, dropped off into his cup. What did the guy do? Did he run off and buy a mansion, or a mansion for the ring? I'm not sure about the mansion, but did he run off and buy something nice for himself, or sell it and get some money? Well, if you heard the story, of course, the answer is no, he didn't. He put it in his pocket and he kept it just in case the lady would come back. And she did. And when she came back, he said, yes, I've got it here for you. And she was so moved at this act of selflessness by someone who was at the bottom of the heap in society in many ways, that she decided she had to do something about this. And what she did was she created a campaign on social media to raise money for him. Now, I don't remember exactly how much he'd earned, but what I do remember is that he was made a millionaire by the reactions of all the public in America and all over the world who were amazed by what this man did. This is a kind of story which you get all over the internet, of course. But what kind of story is it? If you look at the bottom of the screen, I've put two options there. Is it a heartwarming story that makes you feel nice about the world? Or is it an example of the power of social media? And someone's just said both. And of course it is both. But my point is that quite possibly many of our students, and I think many of us as well really, when we see stories on the internet, we tend to perhaps not analyse it in as much detail as we could. But of course, this could be an example of how social media is transforming lives. And I think it's that level of analysis that is required of students when they do the Ielts exam. And I think you can introduce fun stories in your classrooms, stories that people really will like, and then get students to discuss what the significance or what the implications of those stories are. Let's take just a few more examples and get you seeing if you can do something similar. So here we go. We've got floods cause havoc. That was a recent one, as anyone who's looked at UK news will have seen. Child maths genius, Justin Bieber arrested, and new diabetes medicine. So perhaps if you could just put in the chat box maybe one or two ideas about what these are examples of. Justin Bieber is a Canadian rock star, and he's very young. He was arrested for joyriding. So you don't have to do them in any order, but if you just take one of them, like B, C, D, or whatever, and just tell me what you think it's an example of, if that makes sense. So we're doing what we did with the first picture, try and think of a sort of higher level of analysis, I suppose. Yeah, fantastic ideas. All right. So we've got global warming, somebody said. Which one could that be? A, B, C, or D? Yes, I think clearly that's A. We had advances in medicine a while back. So, yeah, new diabetes medicine could be an advantage of medicine. Full moon, I'm not sure, Stephen, what you mean by full moon. Okay, all right, well, some good ideas there. So, just to give you some ideas, maybe students might indeed say that could be global warming. This could be an example of, I don't know, nature versus nurture, how students don't actually need great schools to go on to achieve wonderful things, that maybe our talents are inside of us. This could be an example of the pressures of celebrity, as someone's just said, Miroslav. Celebrities' lives and how they often face a lot of pressure. Maybe this could be an example of how we're living longer as a society. Okay, so just by getting students to think a little more about the news stories they encounter, I think we can get them to think of things that they could contribute in the Ielts exam, and perhaps some examples they could bring either to their writing part 2 or when they're trying to elaborate on a point they make in part 3. Let's move on. Of course, I mean, the other thing is that students very often do already have knowledge, and I suppose we should see ourselves as providers of knowledge all the time, but maybe more facilitators. I'm sure you would agree entirely. But I think very often with the pressure of the exam, with the stress, that students often find that accessing the ideas that they already have is quite tricky. And I think what we can do is provide students with maybe a little mnemonic or something to enable them to think around problems. Have a look at this one, for example. This is one we came up with. I don't know if you'll think it's any good or not, but we thought of ideas, and then you think of the types of people, so industry leaders, doctors, environmentalists, artists, meaning sort of, more free-spirited people who care more about beauty and expressing ideas, and social workers, people who care about disadvantaged elderly children or disabled people. So the idea is that when they get a question, particularly one that requires them to give an opinion, they can use this mnemonic to try and think about different ideas that they can provide. So we're going to do this the same with you, see if you can think of some ideas. Let's imagine that an out-of-town shopping centre has been built, and we get this question: out-of-town shopping has had a negative impact on society. Do you agree? Can you tell me, what do you think an environmentalist might say? Yes, less green areas for wildlife. Yeah, too many cars. Bad for the rural environment. Yeah, more driving equals more pollution. More fuel as people drive. They would agree. Yeah, very good. Fumes. Should we look at another one now? Let's have a look at what an industry leader might say. Chuck, give me some ideas. It's just water, I promise. Yeah, so about retail space, cheaper, they would defend it. Yeah, yeah. Perhaps good for the, attracting business to the area. Employment opportunities, absolutely, yeah. Okay, let's do one more. What about a social worker? This is this lady here on the left. What might she say? More shopaholics, yes. Less community support. More anonymous, that's interesting, yes. Because you don't know the people in shopping centres. People without a car will have problems. Unfair if you don't have access. Yeah, difficult to get to work. More social problems. Yeah, I don't know if they have more social problems, but certainly problems for the people in old communities that aren't serviced by the shops. Sure, shopping addicts, that's interesting. Okay, good, fantastic. So just by thinking of different people and how they might respond, we can perhaps get our students to think around issues a bit more and access knowledge that they already have. You can, of course, invent your own mnemonic or own way of doing this. Okay, a couple more things because time is running out. Now, I don't know if you've seen this. I'm sure you have, if you've bought a chocolate bar recently or a banana. But can you tell me what you can see in the logo? What does it represent? So perhaps, I'm sure you perhaps know the organisation, or you might do, but what does it represent? A bird? A leaf? A whale? Is it a bird? Is it a plane? The world? Yes, yes, definitely a world there, isn't there? An eye? Oh yes. Nature, wildlife. One of my students said Pac-Man the other day. I don't know if you remember Pac-Man, the computer game. A fish, yes. It's a great logo, isn't it? It really has got so many possibilities. Okay, do you know, it's supposed to be a man or a lady punching the air because they're very happy. Although it does also represent the world, and it represents the leaf as well, so agriculture. And of course, as many of you have said, this is the fair trade logo. I think it's very interesting though that, you know, a lot of my students have never seen this before, even though they do go shopping and they've bought chocolate bars, of course. I think they hadn't familiarised or hadn't sort of asked what it was about. I think logos like this, and there could be any number of logos from campaigning organisations or charities, can really spark interest. You could do what we just did, so you could ask what it represents and get them describing it. But I think perhaps more interestingly, you could get them to go away and do some research on each one, if you are lucky enough to have access to the internet. If you don't, they probably will in their pocket, so you could get them to do a quick bit of research on their mobile internet. What you could then do is perhaps get them to create logos. So what I've done here is just put like a speech bubble. So get them to sort of fill it in with what they think the campaigners might be saying. If they find existing slogans on the internet, then you can get them to paraphrase them in simpler language, or in different language, or more effective language. See if you can get them to improve on the slogans that the charities themselves have come up with. But I think just starting with a little visual image like that can set off a whole train of sort of exploration and interest. So there we go, another way of perhaps beginning a world knowledge lesson. And the final idea I'd like to just throw at you really is, yeah, the idea of using sort of communicative tasks such as dominoes to introduce world knowledge to students. So, for example, I usually use dominoes to do things like phrasal verb or preposition practice. Certainly things that are language related. But of course, I don't think there's any reason why we shouldn't do something like that with knowledge as well. Maybe to teach students or to get them practicing thinking about cause and effect relationships. So let's just play a very quick game ourselves. Which one should we go for? Should we go for quality of, or consumerism first of all? So we're looking for the right-hand side of the dominoes here. Well, I suppose you can go up the other way, couldn't you? You could go upwards. So any part of the domino, and see if you can tell me one domino that you could put next to consumerism. Economic growth, yeah. Where's economic growth? I can't see it now. Oh, there it is, yeah. Pollution, yeah, good one. Recycling, yes. Obesity. Poverty, yeah. There it is. Yeah, great. Okay, good. And of course, you wouldn't just let students put them down, you would have to get them to justify it. So before doing a game like this, maybe a bit of language like leads to or may cause. So a quick review of cause and effect language, and then you could get the class going with the game. Lots of speaking opportunity and hopefully fun as well. I think that's part of the point really, that IELTS, you know, students often see it as a bit of a chore. I have to do IELTS is something I often hear. But I don't see why that should be the case. I think if we bring world knowledge into the classroom, if we make our classroom sort of windows on the world that will allow them to explore the world around them and get interested in things, then I think they might see IELTS as something of pleasure, something they really enjoy studying for. And of course, more importantly, if we teach world knowledge, I think we're going to give students that confidence, which we mentioned at the very beginning, going into the exam. And I think that's so important, not just because, I mean, they don't get rated on confidence, but if you think how confidence often translates in the exam to improved fluency, if you're confident and you've got lots of ideas, you tend not to repeat yourself so much. You tend to speak in a more animated way. You've got more, therefore, variety in your voice, intonation, pronunciation scores get better. And if you've got more ideas, you structure your responses better. You can use markers like first, second, third, or you can develop your responses more. So I think that knowledge and that confidence can really translate into higher IELTS scores. And for that reason, I think making world knowledge a more central part of our lesson is a really good idea. Anyway, I think we have to sort of wrap up now, because I think we've been going for about 45 minutes. And we're going to have a quick question and answer session if you if you want to ask a few more questions, and I'll do my best to give you some answers. And just to let you know, the book itself, the IELTS Foundation Masterclass is the title, and it will be coming out in the summer or late summer this year. And we've packed it with, little infographics and world knowledge just to try and make the IELTS teaching full of this sort of world knowledge that will excite and sort of invigorate your students' learning. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Yes, someone's just asked if the book contains photocopyables, and yes, it does. Online there will be photocopyable resources, and in the back there's also photocopyable resources. What we're actually doing in the teacher's book is we're providing a kind of topic summaries to give students a bit of background in world knowledge, a bit like a magazine almost, but with questions as well that they can, IELTS questions that they can practice with. But we're doing sort of trying to make knowledge quite a focus of the teacher's materials. But yeah, this kind of game bank we will put online, so that will be available to you. If anyone's got any questions, do feel free to put them to me. I don't have a blog about teaching actually, but I should do. So I should put the video back on, shouldn't I? You don't want to look at a black space. Yeah, IELTS Foundation Masterclass is the name of the book. Yeah, it's a good question, isn't it? What kind of homework can you give for world knowledge? I think hopefully the kind of activities you can do in the class will sort of set off maybe a habit of engaging with content that students may not have before. I'd love to think that students might start thinking about things that they're in contact with anyway. So perhaps when they see a news story, they might just think about how they could use that example in perhaps an essay they were writing. But I think, yeah, students often require exam practice for homework. So I think really it's the classroom where I think we can really excite students about world knowledge. Perhaps create a web quest, that fair trade logo we saw. Perhaps that could be great homework. Does the book cover how to put a whole piece of writing together? Yeah, what we've done is tried to take a process approach to writing. So we've started with, the first lesson is analysing questions. Then we've moved on to brainstorming. Then we've moved on from brainstorming to plan. Then we've moved on from planning to topic sentences to paragraphs, and so on. So we've tried to sort of hold students' hands through the process of structuring a whole piece of writing. Although there is a genre approach too, because each stage deals with a different type of essay they will have to write as well. Nick, is IELTS equivalent to CPE? There's no equivalent. Ielts is just basically a rating test, so it sort of tells students what level they will be at. It's not actually a sort of a test where they have to achieve a certain level in order to get a certificate. Yeah, with writing successfully, I think it's very difficult with the vocabulary and the grammar, I think, to really bump students' level up very quickly. I think with language, it's just contact with English and reading, especially low-level reading, that really improves students' basic grammar and control of structure. I think what I would do in the classroom more is just train them in responding to tasks, analysing questions, and focusing on questions, brainstorming, this sort of thing, getting them to think around issues and problems, because I think that's the quickest way they can improve their writing. Also, things like cohesive features, I think are really important, because just with a very few cohesive sort of phrases and expressions, I think you can really get the cohesion score higher. But I think it's so difficult with the vocabulary and grammar, because examiners are trained to see through memorized chunks of language. So anything that looks kind of memorized is just ignored, really. And I think it has to be a sort of systematic knowledge, competence with the language. So I tend not to focus. I focus on activating existing grammar, but not teaching them much by way of sort of new grammar. It's academic IELTS, the book. Yeah, Sarah's just asked, said they missed the beginning. Yes, there's a recording of it. So if you go to the website, you'll be able to see a link to the whole webinar and see the video of it. Yeah, thanks, Rachel. Yeah. Yeah, someone wanting email. Yeah, you're welcome to send me an email. That'd be lovely. It's NIC. Shall I type it in on the screen? I'll try and type it. Yeah, there we go. If you want to drop me a line, that'd be fantastic. Marina, yeah, IELTS isn't really a level as such, although most students are actually trying to do get 6.5 in this country, in the UK. I think in many countries they get a very different thresholds. A lot of European countries, I think, tend to set higher thresholds. If you want to get to some universities, it has to be higher. Some students, as far as I know, just require sort of 4.5 in many sort of Middle Eastern countries. Apparently, that's an important threshold to reach. So no, there's no. It depends what level students need to reach. I think that's the bottom line. Yeah, if a student creates chunks of memorized language, Stephanie, it's not marked really. I don't, you know, they have to really, and you can see it immediately when it's something that's been memorized. I don't know if you agree. I think it does come across really easily. I've just put, oh, I see, sorry, I've just put my email on the screen, but I've just realised you can't see it, so apologies. Thanks, Rachel, for listening there. Here's my email coming. There it is, nick_fauna@yahoo.com. Sorry. You're welcome. Yeah. Thanks, Eleanor. Yeah. Okay, thanks everyone. Yeah. Well, if there are no more questions, I'll just hang on for a bit, just in case anyone does think of anything. But I'll turn off my video just for a moment. Okay. The book is, it's mostly for classes. I mean, there's a class audio and everything which I imagine would be, yeah, it tends to work better in classes. But there's plenty of great readings in there, and I think, I don't know, I think on a one-to-one level that students should get a lot out of it, but it wasn't designed as a one-to-one book, it was designed as a class book. Thanks, Abdullah. Yeah, thanks, Rachel. Great, good. Yeah, yeah, thanks, Sonia. For one-to-one material, yeah, it's a good question. There are series, aren't there? I know the Midland series, entitled sort of reading, writing, listening and speaking. I think I've used those quite successfully before. I don't know if Rachel can suggest any ideas. I think individuals tend to use the practice tests quite a lot, don't they? Yeah, I think giving them the input, Stephanie, and just getting them to do the output, I think it's quite nice in a way. It can allow you to take a bit of a back seat, perhaps. Online resources. Yeah, I think it tends to be the quality of online resources that are an issue. But Rachel, I don't know if you want to suggest anything from the OUP side. Well, I think foundation level is just something which I mean, most universities require. If you want to start a university course, they would require you to go in at 6.5. But I think most students would, or most universities would, accept students onto foundation programs with a slightly lower band score. Usually it's about 5.5, depending on the course and the university. And we tend to think of that as about 5.5. So a lot of students who do Ielts just need 5.5 to get onto their university foundation course. And once they're on that, the university would generally accept them onto the main program. Thanks, Rachel. Yeah. Good. Is there anything about correcting writing? Well, we've got a writing bank at the back. In fact, the last unit is about correcting mistakes. It's all about sort of checking your work. We've seen that as sort of the end of the writing process that I mentioned before. And there's also a writing bank in the back of the book, which gives a sort of model answer and then a less strong answer next to it. And it asks students which features of the model answer are missing in the other answer, so that they have to see how they can improve it. And then we give them a fresh question so they can just have a go at it. And we've done, I think there are 6 models there for 3 different essay types and 3 different part 1 report types as well. So yeah, the idea is that they can learn to identify weaknesses and improve upon material. So hopefully that will really help with reflecting on and improving accuracy and improving their responses. Yeah, it does. It provides samples with bands at the back, yeah. I agree, Bassir. Yeah, well, I said this speaking. I mean, to be honest, part of the webinar today was, Susan, was about you know, how I think it's most valuable to teach speaking. I think we tend to start with the sort of language first, and then expect the ideas to sort of follow. And I don't think that's true. I don't think that's the way we learn languages or the way we express ourselves in real life. I think we should give them the ideas first, and I think the need to express those ideas will then help the language to follow. So rather than sort of start with, you know, the language that they need for speaking. I'd start with the ideas and then get their language on the board and analyze it, see if you can improve it, and then drill structures. But ideas first, then language, I would have said. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Name of the book, Ielts Foundation Masterclass. No samples yet, as far as I know, but maybe Rachel will have something to say about when they might be available. Okay, thanks, Stephanie. Yeah, all right. Thanks very much, everyone. I'm going to go as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that, Nick. Looks like people found that really interesting. So thank you very much to you all for attending, and we look forward to seeing you at future webinars. Just to confirm, I'll be sending around a follow-up email with a certificate of attendance, a link to the recording of this webinar, and also a request for your feedback. So please just follow the instructions on the screen to leave the session. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.